Most bourbon bottles want you to believe the story already happened. They tell you where it was made, how old it is, what you're supposed to taste, and then they stop. But every once in a while, a bottle does something different. It doesn't just tell you what it is, it lets you see where it lived. Today's bottle isn't rare, it's not impossible to find, and it's definitely not the loudest name on the shelf, but it might be one of the few that actually lets you follow its trail, from the rickhouse to the rack to a single red dot on a map. This is the story of Baker's Bourbon and what happens when a bottle decides to show its work. Welcome back to Bourbon Hunter Anonymous. The bourbon is named for Baker Beam, the grandnephew of Jim Beam, a man known inside the distillery as hardworking, motorcycle riding, truck driving whiskey guy who was a fixture at the Jim Beam distillery for nearly 4 decades. He wasn't just a name on a label, he was part of the family's lived legacy in Kentucky. In 1992, Booker Noe, another Beam family legend and 6th generation master distiller, created Baker's Bourbon in his honor as part of Beam's early small batch collection, a tribute to Baker's passion for bourbon and his larger-than-life personality. For most of its early life, Baker's was simply one bourbon among the Jim Beam small batch lineup, aged at least 7 years and bottled at 107 proof, a solid proof point that gives this bourbon real presence without being over the top. But in 2019, the brand underwent a meaningful transformation. Beam Suntory repositioned Baker's entirely as a single barrel bourbon. That means no batch or blending. Each bottle comes from one individual barrel. Each barrel has its own unique aging story, influenced by where it sat in the rickhouse, how weather varied over the years, and when it was dumped. The label now includes details like barrel age, warehouse location, and a serial number tied to that specific barrel. This wasn't just a packaging change, it was a statement. Baker's was now meant to be experienced as a unique bourbon, not a product. So what makes Baker's unique? Single barrel individuality. Unlike many blended bourbons, every barrel tells a story. Where that barrel sat, high in a hot rickhouse, near a drafty corner, or somewhere in between, impacts how the whiskey aged. Some barrels will lean more vanilla and oak, others more spice, and some show unusual nuances that only time and environment can create. Here's one of the coolest parts about Baker's. Baker's bottles carry a serial number on the neck tag. You can go to Baker's official single barrel journey page on their website and input that serial number to see. While I was writing this episode, I realized something very important. I needed a bottle of Baker's in front of me, for research purposes. Very serious journalism. I grabbed a Baker's 13 year from this past year in 2025. So I go to the Baker's website to do a barrel tracking thing they advertise, because if a bourbon says track your barrel, I'm absolutely tracking my barrel. You get to the site and it says enter your serial number. Cool. Love that for us. Except I'm staring at my bottle like it owes me money and I do not see a serial number anywhere. So I click their helpful little link that says don't have a serial number. It shows a picture of Baker's bottle with a label hanging off the neck. Mine does not have that. At this point I'm thinking, did I buy a counterfeit Baker's? Am I about to uncover the underground Baker's black market? And then it hit me. Duh, Tina, the metal tab. Sure enough, there it is, tiny, sneaky, judging me silently. So for anyone who wants to play along at home, here's my serial number, 000213651. You're welcome. Use it responsibly. The website welcomes you and lets you know they've been tracking this bottle using radio frequency identification data, or RFID, which sounds either extremely high-tech or like something the government would definitely use to find me later. It tells me my bottle was bottled at the Claremont campus, which, as we know, is Beam's main campus. So far, nothing scandalous. No secret warehouses, no underground tunnels. Yet. Then the screen morphs into an actual aerial map of the Claremont warehouses. And I mean actual map. Like I'm suddenly playing Google Earth, Bourbon Edition. As you scroll, it zooms in and shows exactly where my barrel lived. 2nd floor, rack 44. Then it marks the exact spot with a little red dot. I don't know why that made my brain light up like a raccoon finding a shiny object, but it absolutely did. That red dot, that's my barrel. Next, it tells me the barrel was filled in November 2011, and immediately I stopped caring about bourbon and start thinking, where was I in November 2011? Turns out, not thriving. I had just moved back to Illinois from Florida. I hated it. I was working retail. My daughter was 4 years old. Meanwhile, in the real world, according to the website, November 2011 was unhinged. NASA observed an asteroid 1,300 feet across pass right by Earth, the largest since 1976. Love that. Then apparently on November 20th, 2011, a 2-year-old German coolie named Woodley was caught driving his owner's mobile home down a street in Darwin, Australia. If you weren't following that, because I didn't know what a German coolie is, it's a dog. They stopped it safely. Woodley was not arrested. And on Thanksgiving, November 24th, 2011, a wild turkey broke into a restaurant in Penn Hills, Pennsylvania, and the restaurant closed for the day. No injuries, just vibes. I actually looked these stories up. They're real. James Bean did not lie. This bottle had a chaotic childhood. Then the website moves into Kentucky weather, because as we all know, weather is basically the co-author of the bourbon. From 2011 to 2025, the hottest temperature recorded was 103 degrees with 90% humidity. That summer heat forces the barrels to expand, pushing the bourbon deep into the pores of the wood. Then comes the coldest day, -2 degrees with 5% humidity. The website says the barrels breathe out and the bourbon pulls back from the wood, bringing those oaky flavors with it. Basically, summer shoves flavor in, winter pulls flavor back out. Nature is doing barrel strength yoga. The barrel's dump date was May 2025. I bought this bottle in September 2025. Yes, I tracked that, and no, I'm not okay. As I keep scrolling through this interactive story, I'm introduced to something called Barrel Scope. This is where bourbon meets astrology. It says, Scorpios are often described as persistent and have a brooding manner about them, and we couldn't think of a better way to describe your barrel. Which, okay, dramatic. Then it says, for more than 7 years, my bourbon sat in the rick house being drawn in and out of charred oak, squeezing every vanilla note and nuance it could from the wood. Which, yes, mine is 13 years, so technically correct, but that's like describing a marathon runner as someone who walked for a bit. Now, here's where they lost me. The barrel was dumped in May, which makes it a Taurus or a Gemini. Scorpio is October through November, and my purchase date was September 3rd, 2025. So I don't know what star chart we're using here, but Mercury was clearly in the rick house. Finally, the site confirms everything. Age, 13 years, 6 months. Proof, 107. Flavor profile, apple, spice, caramel, vanilla, oak, and charred oak. Charred oak wins as the strongest note, which honestly tracks after 13 years of emotional damage. Then it gives you the option to save and share a neat little flyer with your bottle's full life story. And that's when it hits you. This isn't just a bottle. It's a documented survivor of heat, cold, asteroids, rogue dogs, wild turkeys, and Kentucky weather. And somehow, it still made it into my glass. The 7-year single barrel. This is the core expression, aged a minimum of 7 years, bottled at 107 proof, and sold widely. It carries that classic bean character with extra depth thanks to its single barrel identity. Many bourbon drinkers note typical bean-style nuttiness, oak and vanilla, though exact profiles vary significantly from barrel to barrel. The 13-year single barrel, a rarer sibling, Baker's 13-year single barrel bourbon whiskey takes that same base and lets it age much longer. This is limited edition, hits deeper expressions of caramel, toasted oak, dried fruit, and more concentrated spice. Its release is not annual everywhere, and when it hits shelves, it often becomes a mini hunt for collectors and enthusiasts alike. Single barrel bourbons are part of a broader trend in whiskey where individuality is prized. Unlike blended bourbons that aim for consistency, single barrel bottles embrace variation. Every pour might not show something slightly different. Bartenders and collectors often highlight this as part of why single barrel whiskeys are so compelling. They're conversation starters, not just spirits. For Bakers, this means stepping out of the shadow of its bigger siblings and standing on its own as a bourbon that rewards exploration, if you're willing to put in the time to learn about where your bottle came from. Since the switch to single barrel, the Baker's bottle has really leaned into its whole every bottle has a story thing. And honestly, the bottle itself wants to be part of the conversation. First, the label. Silver label, black text, very serious, very I didn't come here to be flashy. Right now I'm looking at a 13-year from 2025, and the label does exactly what it's supposed to do. It tells you the age and the proof without yelling at you. no gold foil gymnastics, no script font trying to convince you it's special, just facts. The bottle itself is thick. Not skinny, not fat, just sturdy. This is the kind of bottle that feels like it could survive falling off of a tailgate at a distillery picnic and still be fine. It's got good weight in the hand, like it wants you to know, I've been aging for over a decade, pick me up with respect. Now the topper. This part I actually like. It's plastic, but don't panic, it looks like metal. It's stamped with Baker's logo, the proof, and Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Which I appreciate because if I'm going to open a bottle, I want it to remind me exactly what kind of life choices I'm making. Then there's the metal tag. Yes, actual metal. The same one I mentioned earlier when I was hunting for that serial number like I lost my keys. And this thing clanks. You cannot sneak this bottle anywhere. You cannot quietly pour a glass at a get-together you didn't ask to attend. That tag will rat you out immediately. One little clink and everyone knows, oh, someone's coping. On the tag itself, you've got a lot going on. Baker's is etched right into the metal, release year, proof, age. That pesky serial number you absolutely will need later. And then at the very end, there's just a lonely little bee. No explanation, no context, just a bee. And honestly, it reminds me of old typesetting from way back, the kind you'd see on antique tools or early labels. It feels intentional, almost like a quiet signature. Not flashy, not explained, just there. Baker's bourbon might not turn heads like some harder to find bottles, but what it does offer is a deeply personal, real-world connection between barrel and glass. Its history ties back to real Beam family personality. Its production celebrates individuality, and its barrel tracking makes every bottle feel like a small discovery. If you love bourbon with a story, not just a label, Baker's deserves your attention. So that's Baker's. Not a unicorn, not a bottle people line up for overnight. Not something that breaks the internet when it drops, but somehow it still tells a better story than a lot of bottles that do. This one didn't rely on hype. It didn't need a lottery. It didn't need to pretend scarcity was a personality. It just sat there in one place, on one rack, on one floor, through heat, cold, chaos, asteroids, rogue dogs, wild turkeys, and whatever else life threw at Kentucky that year. And then eventually, it became this. A bottle with a paper trail, a digital footprint, a literal red dot on a map saying, here, this is where I lived. That's kind of rare in bourbon. Most bottles don't want you to know where they came from. Baker's hands you the coordinates and says, go look if you want. And I think that's why this one sticks with me, because bourbon isn't always about chasing the next thing. Sometimes it's about slowing down long enough to understand the one already in your glass. If you made it this far, you're probably not here for hype either. You're here for the stories, the weird details, the stuff nobody talks about. And that's what Bourbon Hunter Anonymous is. No flexing, no flipping, just following the trail. Wherever the barrel leads. I'll see you on the next one.